Anyway, here with reaction, House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer and House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan. Great to have you both. Congressman Jordan, let me start with you. All right, so first I thought we had whistleblower protection laws in this country, and I also thought that Democrats loved even hearsay whistleblowers, but they only apparently like whistleblowers if they're going after Donald Trump. We now have allegations by both FBI whistleblowers and IRS whistleblowers that they're not being protected by the laws in this country and that the retaliation is taking place. What can you tell us about it?
No, they're trying to crush him, and you're exactly right, Sean. It was an anonymous whistleblower who was behind the whole impeachment of President Trump a few years ago. So they're trying to crush these guys because they're coming forward and not only telling us about the double standard and the attack on President Trump, but the attack on we the people. That's the scariest part of all. But if you step back and think about this double standard for a second, Sean, think about this. 7 years ago, it was Jim Comey, Andrew McCabe, and Peter Strzok who went after President Trump and his campaign with no probable cause, no predicate, no evidence whatsoever. Mr. Durham told us that this past week. Today, it's Alvin Bragg, Fani Willis in Georgia, and of course now it looks like Jack Smith here in Washington going after President Trump. And my guess is they don't have any real probable cause, real predicate, or real evidence to do that. It just shows the double standard. And if you come forward and talk about this stuff, that's when they come after you. That's when they try to crush you. We saw that from those whistleblowers last week in the hearing.
All right. So Jim Jordan's committee, just to get everybody straight, is looking into whether the FBI is politicized and the DOJ weaponized. Jim Comer, your House Oversight Committee, is looking into the Biden family or the Biden family syndicate. One of the things that you were told is that there is a 1023 form. And on this form, it would be evidence of what resulted in then Vice President Joe Biden committing or performing certain acts in exchange for money for him and his family. The FBI has steadfastly refused to hand over that document. Now, Kevin McCarthy, after a conversation with Director Wray, said that it seemed like that would be forthcoming. And now I'm reading today again that it's not forthcoming.
Yeah, no, I'm not as optimistic about getting that from the director as Speaker McCarthy. I appreciate Speaker McCarthy. He's sticking with me on this. But we've had 2 meetings with surrogates from the FBI. Both meetings were honestly very patronizing. They were talking about the need for us to trust them and for us to not worry about it. The reason we're concerned about this allegation is that it's consistent with a pattern that we've seen in several other countries where then Vice President Biden would fly into a country during the last year of the Obama administration, meet with government officials, and then weeks later, members of his family would receive through shell companies direct payments from foreign nationals. This informant alleged this was taking place 3 years before anyone knew about these shell companies or anyone knew that members of the Biden family were getting money while Joe Biden was vice president. So that's why this is of the utmost importance to us. The FBI won't even confirm that this 1023 exists, much less tell us what exactly they did to investigate the validity of the claim.
Let's talk about the latest in your investigation, Jim Jordan, and very specifically, we know that in 2016 that the FBI, according to the Durham report, gave favorable treatment to Hillary Clinton. We also know that Operation Crossfire Hurricane never should have been opened. We also know that they used an unverifiable and false dossier, a dirty Russian dossier that Hillary Clinton paid for. And they put their cinder blocks on the scale of a presidential election. Yeah. But we also know that it happened in 2020 in the form of the FBI. Even though they had Hunter Biden's laptop, they authenticated it, according to John Solomon, in the spring of 2020. But they had, in the months leading up to the 2020 election, weekly meetings with big tech companies, warning them that they may be victims of disinformation campaigns, and it may be about Joe and Hunter Biden. Now, is that the FBI putting their cinder blocks again on the scale of an election? And can you add the CIA down to that list?
Yeah, but it's not just the 2016 and 2020 election. In between that and 2018, it was the Mueller investigation. And then this past election in 2022, they raid President Trump's home 91 days before that midterm election. But they didn't do the same to Joe Biden, even though they knew he had classified document problems. They waited until after the election. And then, of course, here we are heading into 2024, and they're already doing the same thing. Alvin Bragg indicted President Trump in New York using federal tax dollars with no real issue there whatsoever. It's ridiculous what they did. Fani Willis is looking to do it in Georgia, the same darn thing. And of course, Jack Smith, as reported in the Wall Street Journal, may be, as a special counsel, may be indicting President Trump on the classified document issue. Joe Biden had classified documents at 4 different locations, but they're going to indict President Trump. This is why this drives Americans crazy, and well, it should. And it's why what Kevin McCarthy, Speaker McCarthy, and we're doing as Republicans to show how these agencies have been turned on we the people, I think is so darn important.
Congressman Comer, will we ever get the exact figure how much money the Biden family did in business with hostile regimes like Russia and China and Ukraine and Kazakhstan and a dozen other countries? Are we ever going to learn how much money they made? Are we ever going to discover what Joe Biden knew when he knew it? We know he lied to the country when he said he never had a discussion with his son about his foreign business dealings. Will we get to the bottom of this? And do you believe at the end of the day that access was sold by then Vice President Joe Biden?
I believe something of value was given to these foreign countries, these adversaries of ours, or they wouldn't have sent so much money to the various different members of the Biden family. I mean, anyone that has any sense of objectivity would recognize the fact that it's not normal behavior for relatives of a sitting vice president to receive wires through phony companies from foreign nationals all over the planet. So I believe that we will get to the bottom of it. We've already uncovered all these shell companies. We've uncovered various different bank accounts. We discovered that 9 different Biden families members received payments. This was information that was never known before we began our investigation just about 3.5 months ago. So we're continuing to follow the money trail. Right now, we're hoping that we can get a little information from the FBI because this is an important part of our investigation. This is a link that would directly tie Joe Biden into this corruption. So hopefully the FBI will do the right thing, and we're going to continue to press forward to get that information.
All right, Congressman James Comer, Congressman Jim Jordan. This is important work, what you're both involved in. You're working in tandem, and we look forward to the results of the investigations, both of them. Thank you. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.